Microphone on. Our board business meeting on October 22nd. Call this meeting to order at 6:03 p.m. Can I have a roll call, please?
Reverend Eilert.
Here.
Mrs. Jaranek. Mrs. Mangan.
Here.
Dr. Swetchenow.
Here.
Mrs. Washburn.
Here.
Thank you. Mrs. Jaranek is doing her other duties at her school. It has conferences this evening, so she'll not be joining us, but she did give us a report on the Student Experience Committee. I'll share later. Let's please join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty. All right, the board agenda was published last week. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved. I'll second.
Right. We have a roll call, please.
Mrs. Mangan.
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenow.
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes.
Reverend Eilert.
Yes. Thank you. We have minutes from our last meeting from October 1st that are in board docs. Are there any additions, corrections to the minutes as presented? I have a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved. Second.
You roll call, please.
Mrs. Mangan.
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenow.
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes.
Reverend Eilert.
Yes. Thank you. All right, well, welcome to everyone that is with us this evening, a number of administrators here and a few guests. And I believe we have at least one those guests that's going to be speaking tonight as part of the hearing of the public.
Yes. Mark Kudalowski.
My name's Mark. I graduated here at the high school back in 2007. Have still lived in the area for the most part since then. And I don't know, the past couple of years, I just kind of have got into a bit of a recycling binge, for lack of a better word, and been picking up recyclables throughout Loveland and other areas as well too. And over the past 2 years, the recycling rate in Loveland has gone up from 14% to just over 24%. Started this in July of 2022. And this year, I've actually talked to the city manager, Dave Kennedy, and he's added in 4 different parks bins. And also, I just talked to him about a little more than a week ago. He's adding them in the downtown area, more in the downtown, and also on the bike path. And with more than 100,000 people, from what I hear, that's thousands that will be saved each year. And I know that you guys have bins at each of the areas. I just want to make sure that bins are in the right place, whether they're in the classrooms, the cafeteria, and that the janitors, I don't know all the ins and outs. I don't need to know all the ins and outs, but I just want to make sure that I think it's an important thing. A lot of progress has been made, and I think it would just be a good thing to pass for the next generation. I know oftentimes I have gone to the dumpster to see what is in, and often these milk things are in the dumpster. No judgment or anything, but it would be nice if things like that ended up in the right place, and it means getting a few extra, and if it means getting a few extra bins, we'd just like to ask for that. And thank you for all that you guys do here as well too. I'm looking, I don't even want to go there right now. Just want to say thank you guys for what you guys do. My number's on there. If you guys feel free to reach out to me at some point to support what I've been doing, I'm here.
Thank you.
And if you have any questions, feel free to ask as well too.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
All right. The next thing on our agenda then are the administrator reports. Those again were in board docs. I don't believe we have any oral reports, that's right. So everyone can see those as that reported out. Lots of great things going on in our buildings. We'll hear some more about that from our students in a few minutes here. Board president reports. We will be making a transition in November with our Great Oaks representative. Christina Jaranek will take over that role for Kathy Lorenz, who's been continuing to serve in that role. Kathy did submit a report for this month. Great Oaks Board met at Diamond Oaks campus for their October meeting. The following Loveland Live Oak students were recognized: Mason McQuitty and Cameron Schweitzer for job placements, Dave Rhodes for the October Award of Excellence. The following meetings for prospective parents were announced. On the 21st of October, there will be a webinar at 6:30 p.m. On October 28th, a coffee chat at Anderson Library at 7 p.m. On October 30th, a coffee chat at the Madeira Library at 6:30 p.m. And you can contact Live Oaks if interested in those activities. Kathy will be here at our November meeting as well as we make that handoff. Said Christina was at the Student Experience Committee. Oh, great. Yes, please do.
We had a student experience committee meeting and lots of great things came out of that meeting. I'm just stealing Stacy's notes here, talking about the PD last week and how great it was and how much they accomplished. Lots of work with iReady, ELA adaption and safety training, along with some teacher work time in there. Talked about the different curriculum adoptions for this year. She updated us on where we stand as a district as far as teacher PD and the science of reading, and we are way ahead, I would say, as far as our teachers getting the work done in that area. She also updated us on the AI thought leader cohort, and it sounds pretty amazing, and they're doing some pretty great things in addition to the group meetings. They're doing some individual training with the AI expert. She also updated us on the leadership cohort. We got a great gifted update, which I'm sure she'll report out on in the near future, but our numbers there are really good as far as coding and making sure that we're, one, in compliance, but two, getting money from the state where we can for that, for those kids. The district report card was briefly mentioned, but I'm not going to steal her thunder there. Some course proposals may be coming our way in the next few weeks, so we'll be watching for those. And some exciting Aubrey dashboard updates that are coming in the near future, talking about strategic vision and some things for the public to be able to see, and then also some internal updates to Aubrey, so none of our students fall through the cracks. So lots going on there.
Thank you for sharing. Any other reports on any of the other committees? Anything from communication to share?
I would just, I know that Mike and John will report on it, but we had our second CAT meeting this past week on the school finances that was really well attended, and I want to just compliment Mr. Espy for his work on that. Was absolutely outstanding. And Mrs. Jaranek wanted us to mention too that she's heard from quite a few community members positive feedback. So thank you to everybody for, Mr. Setters, Mr. Broadwater, everybody for your work on that. So very positive. And then the school foundation applications were due a couple weeks ago for grants, and we're working through those. We had over $15,000 worth of requests. So really pleased to see them coming in across all of our buildings. So, and all different departments. So more to come on that in the next couple weeks.
Great, thank you. Then finally, I know it's been a difficult couple of weeks, particularly at our high school with the death of two students that related to Loveland High School, and it's been a challenging time for students and staff. So I thought we conclude my report by taking a moment of silence to remember those students that have been lost. Thank you. All right, let's next move into our student representative reports.
Hi, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Lily, and I'm doing a report on LECC. LECC has successfully implemented iReady, KRA, and AimsWeb. Now, for me, that's just kind of a lot of letters that don't mean a lot. Gosh, that is oof. But it's actually a really big step because it places kids with data reviews and sets goals for them individually. To be able to have that is super helpful for these kids to earn at their own pace. Back when I was in kindergarten, which does seem like a really long time ago, being told I was at a college reading level was pretty fun, but it feels like we didn't do as much about it. But now the idea is that what we do with that level. That's what these sources are for, is to give kids instructions not as a mass, but as individuals for their own pace. There will be training for teachers for iReady that helps them to create templates to outline their teaching. Annual goals are being met down at the Early Childhood Center with regular drills monthly, and meeting times have been adjusted for teachers to optimize time for safety protocols for the students. At the end of October, LECC will celebrate some of their Tiger Cubs in the news. They are selected by teachers and demonstrate our core values. One of the biggest accomplishments, which is saying something because this month has been really successful, is the LEPTA had a really successful fundraiser that is closing in at 60 grand. This funding, goes for things like field trips and enrichment activities for the kids. So thank you so much to LEPTA for organizing and executing that. To close this out, I just want to give a big thank you to LECC staff because without them, any of this could not have been possible. We talk about all these things and we do all those things, but without all these teachers implementing it, it doesn't mean a whole lot. So thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is CJ Margraf, and I will be reporting on LPS and LES. So to start, we have some building and department projects. As Lily mentioned, at all three buildings, both buildings have completed their iReady assessments, which, like she said, help students get a personalized plan for their learning this year. 6 LES teachers are leading a new ELA program called Benchmark. All of these teachers have completed their second round of professional development within Benchmark, and so hopefully we'll be able to get that implemented soon. Teachers are perfecting new ways to learn strategies such as iReady to improve instruction and personalize it all. Next, we'll move into professional development updates. So first, we have our October in-service days. Teachers completed CPR and CPI training with the help of the police department, making sure our students are safe. We had administrators and teachers working hard on establishing building goals for this year. And we had staff and students working through the public safety works modules and ALICE training, thanks to Mr. Brian over here. We had that at the high school as well. And then some accomplishments. In October, Terrific Tigers were on Pizza with the Principals. I remember that when I was there. That was always a good time. During the book fair, students raised money to donate books to Cincinnati Children's Hospitals. And then LES has begun their Compassion Project. So it's Socktober. If you have any extra socks laying around, find an LES student. They could definitely use them. And then, as Lily mentioned, the dance-a-thon, huge success for LEPTA, raising over 60 grand. So thank you guys. That helps our students with a lot. And then to close out, I kind of wanted to offer you guys a student's perspective. That's something I always try to do. So this one is specifically about me. As you guys may know, and Ellie knows, this is college application season. So big stressful time, fingers crossed. But I just wanted to give a huge shout out to our staff at the high school, specifically the counselors, mine, Miss Hamilton, and Mr. Mitchell, who is our career counselor, if you will. They're just doing a terrific job, and teachers as a whole, managing the stress levels of students. People respond in different ways. And I just want to give a huge shout out to the teachers who are looking out for these students, specifically seniors at this time. And please keep your fingers crossed for me. November 1st is coming soon. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
I'm Ronan Wolfer, and I'll be reporting on the LIS and LMS October board report. The middle schoolers hosted the middle school hosted the first of the two of the first family teacher conference nights on October 8th and the 17th, thanks to the Mint Peace TSA for funding dinners for teachers. The third meeting will be on November 5th that will leave teachers open for conferences the whole day. The middle and intermediate schools have continued with weekly mental health check-ins on the Aubrey platform to supplement the counseling department and Hope Squad. And the campus continues to prioritize student and staff safety with Alice training and active shooter drills. The LIS, ELA, and intervention staff participated in coaching in collaboration with Tana McGregor, and this was the first of their 3 coaching sessions this year. The teaching teams in LIS met for a fall meeting to discuss student progress, their needs, and any support they might have. They're a valuable piece in supporting all students academically and emotionally. Practice and rehearsals for the Finding Nemo production have started for the LMS drama team, and they'll be showing on November 14th, 15th, and 16th. The middle and intermediate school teachers spent time focusing on areas of personalized learning, including gifted training and elective development, department collaboration, and practical safety applications like CPR and CPI. The staff chooses the majority of their lessons so they can assist in their teaching. In continued support of the positive behavior and intervention supports process, LMS and LIS recognize the middle school's Tiger Up students and staff, along with the intermediate school students who received positively proud office write-ups. The upcoming events include the LMS orchestra concert tonight, the 6th grade Walk for Water on October 25th, the book fair from the 28th of October to the 8th of November, the LMS choir concert on October 29th, the LIS conference night, November 7th, LIS Veterans Day Assembly, and LMS will have guest speakers on November 11th, and the LMS has band concert on the 19th. Thank you.
Appreciate all of our students being here again and sharing the great things that are happening in our buildings. We understand if you guys need to head out to do studious things yet this evening, but you're certainly welcome to stay and continue to be part of the meeting.
And I just want to chime in that I'm always impressed by how accomplished all of you guys are. It's so great to see as a board member all of the great things that you guys have done and will do over time. And I wanted to point out in particular, I believe Ronan was second in the district cross country this past weekend for Southwest Ohio. Great job.
Right, Mr. Broadwater, you are.
That's their sign to leave, I guess. That's,
Yep.
all right. Congratulations, Ronan, and nice job to our students. I always appreciate when you mention our staff and how hard they work for our kids. I appreciate that. First, I want to say thank you to President Eilert on the moment of silence for Julian and Isaiah. It has been a tough couple weeks for obviously those families, and we send our thoughts to them. It's been a tough couple weeks for our students and our staff, and so we've tried to put our arms around everybody as much as we can and take care of them, but you're never prepared for those, and I just want to make sure the families know our thoughts are with them as a district. So with that, I do want to go ahead and get started in my presentation. First, you should have gotten your quality profile in the mail, hot off the press. We've heard a lot of great things from the information that's in there. I want to compliment Mr. Setters on how well he has put that together. And I think you've got a lot of information in there. And if anybody has any questions, they certainly can go to our website and can certainly sign up for our community newsletter and receive as much information as we can possibly give. But to Mr. Setters, nice job. Thank you. The next part is I'm going to review. We have a community advisory team, and we opened that up to the community. We have roughly 80 individuals that volunteered to be a part of our community advisory team to the Board of Education. If you remember, part of my direction from the board was to make sure we continue to engage with our community. So we are continuing from our town halls last year to our CAT meetings. And then we just recently, as Lynn Megan had mentioned, we had our second meeting last week with also a town hall attached to it, and we'll report out that meeting next month. So I'm going to report out the first meeting. We reported on 4 different things: student mental health, English language learners, intervention and gifted services, and then the report card. And I will go through this fairly quickly. We're going to have Dr. Puerta report on the report card in a little bit more depth. But as you can see, part of the responses, we sent a survey out about our student mental health services. And if you go to our website, Jesse Coles, who's our Director of Student Services, has done a very nice job of putting together all the services that we have and we offer our students. And I think if you have not seen it, you would probably be surprised at how many different interventions we have available. But on the survey, if you look at that, the question was, Loveland City School District has the appropriate staffing and programming to support student mental health. We had 33 responses. You can see 15 were at 1 or 2, which is they agree. 3 would be the kind of the no response or no real opinion. And then we've got 10 that are to the right. So we'll continue to look at our mental health supports. And part of that equation is communicating out a little bit more robustly what we do offer. So making sure we do that as well. If you look at the response where it says, I understand why we offer student mental health, we had 33 responses and 100% of those responders agreed they understand the need for student mental health. The next graphic, Loveland should explore the ideas to help address student mental health. You can see the bar graph there, the tallest one, more resources and education for families about mental health. To me, I think a lot of that comes back to communicating and make sure we communicate what is offered. Next is the later high school start time they had selected. And so we're looking into that to see what ramifications that would have basically on mental health. We also would take a look at tardies, but there's a lot of moving parts when you start to move start times. So we're looking through that to see exactly what that would mean. You see the next one is additional staffing to address student and family needs, and then consistent positive behavior intervention programs is the 4th one there. English language learners, the next bar graph that you'll see, Loveland has the appropriate staffing and programming to support English language learners. You'll see that 12 are at 1 or 2, 4 are at the 3, which is kind of neutral. And then you've got 7 to the right of that. So we'll continue to look at what we support. If the board remembers, we did add a 0.5 FTE to support our ELL learners this year without adding staffing. We found we have had a staff member that had the certification that was able to slide over and help the ELL learners. I will tell you that our numbers do continue to grow, and we are continuing to monitor what we are making sure we support those kiddos with. The next all blue circle is, I understand why Loveland focuses support on our ELL kiddos. 23 responses, you can see everyone agrees with that. Next, we had intervention and gifted services. And the bar graph indicates that Loveland has the appropriate staffing to support intervention and gifted services. We have 15 that are 1 or 2s, 6 that are somewhat neutral, and then we have 8 that believes we could do more. And part of that, I think Ms. Washburn reported out that Dr. Puerta really has done a really nice job of making sure that not only are we identifying the students, but also identifying the staff that maybe need different certifications so that we do have those kiddos receiving the gifted services that they are already receiving. Then the last circle, which we actually have a red bar there. I understand why Loveland offers intervention and gifted services, 29 responses. We had one of our CAT team members felt gifted services are a luxury and had concerns about the costs, which is good input to have. The Ohio School Report Card. The graph there is, I understand why Loveland has earned a 5-star report card. I think we've reported out quite a bit on why we've done well, and we'll keep doing that. But everybody agreed that they understand that. And for the remainder of the CAT report out, I'll have Mr. Goldie go to the podium there. He is a CAT team member. As he's making his way up, I want to review this graphic. Mr. Setters, myself, Mr. SB, and the rest of the team, we sat down over the course of the 4 years that I have been here, making sure that we have community engagement. The inner ring, you'll see that's students and staff, and that's pretty much a group that's pretty easy to communicate to, right? Because they've got a vested interest in, and so we have those different communication styles for families. Again, our Tiger families, fairly easy to communicate to because we have their contact information and we've got all the different venues that we communicate there. The largest number of communication touch points you'll see is with our community. That's the toughest. To reach out and make sure our community who maybe do not have students in the schools, that we are reaching out and making sure they're aware of all the great things that are going on here in the district. So we'll continue to add to this as we go through, but I think it's a good graphic to see that we are certainly keeping it in the foreground to make sure we communicate with our community, our students and our families and our staff as we go through it. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Goldie, who is a member of our CAT team, to report out on the first CAT meeting.
All right, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. I will say there are obviously in any situation like this, there's a lot of different perspectives, opinions. And so what I've done to the best of my ability is to take a lot of qualitative statements and feedback and gather it together to give kind of consensus ideas, kind of what are the things that were commonly said and repeated. So not each individual response will be represented, but hopefully this will give you a big picture of what was said throughout. Also, if something's brought up that all the districts should do more of this or more of that, I would not take that necessarily as a statement of failure on the district, but rather this wasn't spoken about this evening in the presentation that evening, and hence they said, well, what about this? And so a lot of things will be like that. One thing I will point out in the qualitative feedback, just as a improvement to some of the statistics up there, there was one person who noted that they read the scale backwards and put 5s for disagree, accidentally intending to put 1s. So the one individual who had numerous 5s there was actually intending to say good things rather than disagreeing with the district. So I grouped the together common ideas, and I'll give you a few examples of each one. Really, for the state report card and the gifted and intervention services, I'm going to lump those together because surprisingly, a lot of the common ideas were similar across both of those two categories following the presentations. There was a lot of concern about academic preparedness beyond college and beyond that pathway. Things like workforce development, military pathways, non-traditional experiences, and also the ability to help the high school students with both soft skills, communication, how do you address people, how do you interact and kind of live in the world that we have that's more complex today, and also just life development skills in general. Things like finance skills, also workforce flexibility, given that there's uncertainty about what the future of the workforce will be. And so there's a lot of concern about making sure we're preparing them for what the future may be, given that there's uncertainty about what that future is. The next area I would say was a common area of concern was about individual students. And what I mean by that is things like the state report card would broadly say how the district's doing on average in their statistics. And we realize that we're glad and we're excited about the fact that on average, things are really good. And then just talking about what are ways that we can find individuals that struggle? How do we identify, is there ways to make sure that that teachers have the training, for example, to help identify children that may be going through trauma at home or things that may hinder their progress. And so really about reaching out to the individual student is a major area of concern. On that same path, when we talk about things like intervention for reading, one of the suggestions was to try to find interventions for math services for for the younger students as well. There's a lot that's done to find and identify and do additional services for the kids who have literacy problems, but not as much for the students who have numeracy problems. And so trying to figure out who those kids are and how can we help them earlier, so that way they're not scared of math when they get to times when it's a little bit more complex. One thing, there was a lot of kudos given. One thing that was said is, given that we feel like we're doing well at the state report card, the question is what should our benchmark be? The state has a benchmark, but how do we evaluate ourselves? And so maybe we say, we're glad that we're doing well at the state standard, but we want to hold ourselves up this high. And so trying to figure out what's the right way to benchmark against other districts, what's the right way to figure out how we can develop our own standards, and even suggestions about potentially trying to say, what could we do to track progress of students after they leave the district? And say, are we preparing them for a future, and are they thriving once they leave Loveland School District? On the English language learners, to be honest, a lot of the feedback was somewhat of surprise of the growing need for this service in the district. There was not a lot of awareness. There was discussion, and this is going to be true of everything that you'll probably hear, is the words more staff were used for almost everything and every concern. And that's going to be an ongoing issue. And so this was something saying, do we have the staff to help these kids? Is there the ability to do it? There's a lot of uncertainty about the magnitude of this problem in the district. How many students are there? Exactly how many do we need to help? And there was also, I thought, this is one place that they suggested trying to figure out ways to get other entities in the community connected with some families, with students that have English as a second language, that there might be ways to reach out and to use resources that could help those kids catch up and get proficient as quickly as possible. Finally, on the student mental health discussion, there was, interestingly, I think there's a lot of encouragement to help for the district to do the things that promote student mental health that are not like therapy and counseling and those things. And what I mean by that was like suggestions for later school start times, because the #1 response from the high schoolers was of how they're feeling was that they're tired, right? So things like that that would promote mental health that are not directly talking to them about mental health. Suggestions for that were things like trying to get them more engaged with clubs, activities, outdoor activities like hiking or gardening, helping them develop hobbies, helping them find things that they love in life that kind of bring them forward. And then there was also discussion about trying to help them develop coping skills so that when there is distress, it doesn't turn into full-fledged mental health crises. And so that things like life management, executive function skills, and other distress management techniques that will help them manage the stress that they do face on a daily basis. There was also discussion with the professional services that are provided. Is there a way for these different groups to communicate with each other? So we have counselors and therapists and parents and teachers that all have, and coaches, and lots of people that have different touch points with kids. And someone may see something and say, well, that's a point of concern. But if everyone sees a small point of concern, that might seem like a trend that we might want to figure out ways, are there ways to help connect some of the dots on those. And then one thing that there was a lot of kudos to the district for working to reduce phones in the schools and encouragement to further that. So rather than just saying that they're not available during class time, saying they're not available during school, the period at the end of that sentence. So those are some of the suggestions that were given. Again, there was a lot of feedback. I've done my best to try to read through it and find some of those common things. There was a lot of gratitude to the district for the things that have been done and the progress that's been made, and excitement for figuring out how to continue that and tackle the new problems that we face. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'd like to just thank Dr. Goldie for stepping up to summarize, and it's really, I mean, and compliments to Dr. Gordy, but also compliments to the staff. The feedback in the survey after the CAT was really unbelievable. I mean, to have, I think it was 35 people that took the time to not only give the quantitative response, but also to give qualitative feedback is really beneficial, and it's to create that type of feedback loop in our community. So I appreciate this, the quantitative and the qualitative. It really, I think, will help all of our leaders in our district. So, but big thanks to Dr. Goldie for being the community liaison for us.
And if it's requested, I can provide the summary of my notes from it as well.
Just going to ask.
Absolutely.
That would be fantastic.
I'll forward that on.
I was already taking some notes, and I think this does really help us in thinking about the work that we have before us and some things we've talked about in the past. I know I've asked before about our ELL district strategy. At one point it was kind of an ad hoc thing. We had a few students and we did what we needed for individual students. And as those numbers have now grown, are we over 200 students now?
I don't think we're over 200. 102. Yeah, 102, I think.
But it's exponential growth in the last
Yes.
years.
Yep.
And so thinking about, what does it look like to have more of a district strategy in that regard? Some of those things that we should be thinking about as a board. So thank you for the report and for the work that you're doing on the group.
Yeah, I appreciate it. The one thing that you don't want to have community engagement and not have any action out of it, right? And I heard three things in there that I believe, I had conversations today where we're looking at what action is it we can do to maybe move forward what you're saying. But I would like to see the summary of notes. And this is why we do the community engagement, is to make sure we're addressing what they're saying. So I appreciate the summary very, very much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
And I am going to turn it over to Dr. Puerta to report out on our report card.
Evening. All right. So I'm going to give an overview of the district level for the report card. And then over the next several months, we're going to have the principals come in from each building and share out their own building report card. From a district level, we're rated under 5 different categories and then an overall rating. As the buildings come, different buildings may only have 2 categories, like LCSD doesn't really have any, so he'll kind of report on some other things and some other data. And then some of the buildings may only have, 3 or 4 indicators. So it'll look a little bit different, but from a district perspective, we take everything and calculate everything, and then we get rated in those 5 categories. So overall, 5 stars, which is excellent. Adam, if you want to go to the next slide, thank you. Here's just a couple of tidbits just to kind of share out. We know we're 5 stars. We certainly want to celebrate that. We are one of 18 districts in the entire state of Ohio out of 607 districts to receive 5 stars in every single category. So the way they calculate that is if you have 4 stars in one category and 5 in all the rest, you may still get an overall rating of 5 stars. But in order to have 5 stars across the board and an overall 5-star rating, only 18 districts in Ohio receive that. And then only 2 districts in Hamilton County, us and Madeira, were the 2 districts in Hamilton County who received 5 stars. And then that does put us in the top 3% of districts across the state, which is excellent. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about each component. The achievement component really just takes our test scores. So we're looking at the spring test scores, the OSTs in grades 3 through 8, and the EOCs in the high school at the high school level. Takes all of the students' scores, what level they scored, and actually there's an advanced plus up there too that I didn't get on that slide, but you'll see it on the next slide, and how all of our students performed. And then Adam, if you go to the next slide, you can see how it's calculated. So they take the percentage of students that scored in each of those categories, and then they have a multiplier. So you just multiply it by the points. So as you can see, proficient is sort of like the middle, which is like expected. And so, that's like your ×1 multiplier of 1. And then if you score below proficient, you get less than 1 of a multiplier, and then above proficient, you get higher. And then you just add them all up, really. And so we had 101.9, and then you divide it by the max score, which is set by the state, which was 109.3. That's a little bit of a moving target. You don't always know where that's going to be, and it changes slightly every year. But we ended up at 93.2% of the max score, and we needed 90% or better to receive 5 stars. Just as a point of reference, last year for our performance index, we were 92.1. So we went up a little bit over a percentage from last year. Progress. This is a value added piece. Value added is actually coming out. We have this, but we can't dig down to the teacher level quite yet from last year, but that's actually coming out here in the next week or so. But our progress component rating, we receive 5 stars on here. Basically, you want to see students receive 1 year growth. So you want to see students, the expected growth would be, 1 year from one point in time to 1 year later, and that equals 3 stars. So as long as we're hitting our 3 stars or greater, we're going to receive 5 stars overall because we're hitting the expected growth. And as you can see in many of those categories, significantly above the expected growth for students in 1 year. You can go on to the next one that just kind of describes a little bit more. Early literacy. This is where we're looking at, there are 3 measures. However, in Loveland, we're only graded on 2 of the measures, and I'll explain that a little bit more. But basically, we're looking at proficiency in 3rd grade reading. So what percentage of our students scored proficient in the 3rd grade reading assessment, ELA assessment, and then what percentage of our 3rd graders were promoted to 4th grade, and it's a 60-40 weight. There's a 3rd piece there, indicator, and it's the improving K-3 literacy. But if you have less than 10% of your kindergartners enter kindergarten on track, less than 10% off track, 90% or more on track, that 3rd component does not get calculated for this. And so we had less than 8% last year who entered kindergarten off track. So that component did not get calculated. So it was just a 60-40 weight for us. So on the next slide, it just breaks out for us a little bit how that's calculated. So a proficiency in 3rd grade, which was the 60% weight, we had 82.7% of our students pass the ELA assessment. And then we had 100% of our 3rd graders promoted to 4th grade. So the next slide calculates that out. And then with the weights, you just add that up, and we ended up at 89.62. We needed 88% to get 5 stars. And as a point of reference, we were at 86.62 last year. And this is one that we just missed last year. We were digging it down to the individual student just to make sure that we were accurate. And unfortunately, we did not hit that last year. And there's been a big push this past year for that. So we went up several percentage points in that, and we were able to get back to our 5-star rating in the early literacy. Gap closing, this is the fun one. This is the one that gets really, really in the weeds. So I'll keep it fairly high level, but if you have any questions, I'm certainly happy to have some further conversations. But basically what we're looking at in our gap closing is we're looking at the educational gaps for English, math, gifted, our English language learners proficiency, chronic absenteeism, and graduation for our student subgroups. And then I've listed all of our subgroups there. So it's just making sure that we're equitable across the board and growing all of our students at the same rate. So I know that's really hard to see, but this is basically how it's calculated. So you have all of these different categories over on the left, and I'll talk about each of them briefly. And then you can see your earned points and then possible points. And then it's just simple division from there. And then if you are greater than or equal to 60% or greater, it's 5 stars. So we are at 68.2% for last year. So the first thing we'll look at is our ELA and math achievement and progress. And keep in mind, our progress is at value added where we're trying to grow our students by 1 year. So for actually, Adam, it's easier if we look at the next slide. Yep, there we go. So the 2 graphs up there, you have your English language arts achievement and your math achievement. And those are your OST and EOC scores. So that's just straight scores, kind of like the performance index that we looked at for the achievement component. And those are all of our different subgroups listed on the y-axis. So you can see all of those going down. Orange are our students, and then the black bar is the target that the state set for us. So you can see that we met or exceeded in all of those categories for English language arts and math. So we received 9 out of 9 for achievement for math and 9 out of 9 for achievement in ELA. Down below, yep, there we go. You can see for ELA and math in the little bars where it says ELA 6 out of 9 and math 1 out of 9. That is our value added points for those. So that's the growth measure that we're graded on. For ELA, we hit growth targets for 6 out of 9 of our subgroups. And in math, we hit it for 1 out of 9 Math is the same as last year. ELA, we grew. We were 4 out of 9 last year. So we did make some improvement in the ELA category. Moving on to the English language learner proficiency, graduation, and chronic absenteeism. These categories are all or nothing categories. So you can't earn like 2 out of 5. You either get a 0 or you get a 5. The next slide shows each of those in a little bit more detail. So the graduation rate, again, our students are in orange. The black is what the state set for us. And so those are our different subgroups. You have to have a certain number of students in a subgroup, which is why there aren't 9 here, because we're looking at just one specific class of students, graduating class, whereas with the math and ELA achievements, you were looking at 9 through 12 students or multiple grade levels. So there were a lot more students in those subgroups to give us those subgroup numbers. So here we only have 5 subgroups here, but we met or exceeded in all of those. So we got the 5 points for the graduation rate. Chronic absenteeism. There's 3 ways to meet this goal. We typically at least hit 2 out of the 3, but you only have to meet 1 in order to get your 5 points. And so the goal was less than 18.3% of our students would be chronically absent. And we were at 15.4 last year. So we got our 5 points for the chronic absenteeism rating. And then our EL progress, this is based on the OELPA tests that students, our EL students take. The target was 50.2% would be proficient, and we were at 69.5. So we well exceeded that. So we got 5 points in that category as well.
Dr. Porta, is the measure for chronic, I remember something about they weren't taking into account like excused absences. Is that measure changed the way?
So it has not. So it's,
Okay.
it looks at the percentage of students who miss 10% of school or more. The kind of wonky part with that is that it does take into account excused and unexcused absences. So even students who are turning in doctor's notes or whatever, that still counts against you, I guess you could say. The one piece that has changed with that House bill, I think it's House Bill 110, was originally we would have to send truancy letters to students based on excused and unexcused, and they have corrected that piece. So we no
Okay.
longer are sending a student who was out because they had their tonsils out a truancy letter. So they've sort of corrected that piece, but for the chronic absenteeism part on the report card, I did go back and just double check it, and
Okay.
it's still taking into account both excused and unexcused.
And then let me just follow up with a quick, do we know our breakdown between excused and unexcused with chronic absenteeism?
I'm sure we do. I don't have that off the top of my head, but I can look into that.
I remember having this conversation last year and me saying 18% of kids are chronically absent and having the same conversation about excused and unexcused, and people had gone on extended vacations and were they allowed back. It's probably of value, although from a report card standpoint, we're doing fine. It's probably of value to identify those kids who are chronically absent, because I'm sure that those are the ones who struggle the most. And
Absolutely.
I know that we do that already.
Right.
But it might be worth breaking that down.
Yep. Okay, and then we have the gifted performance indicator. Again, there's 3 components to this, and these are all or nothing. So you either get 0 or 5 points. Go back 1, Adam. There we go. So the first one is performance index. This one's a little bit frustrating. So this is calculated the exact same way as achievement, which was the very first component that we looked at, but we're only looking at gifted students. And so it looks at their gifted performance index out of the max, which is set by the state, and you get your gifted performance index percentage, which is 97.2, just super, that's really impressive. And actually, we improved from last year. Our performance index last year was 96.7. So we went up a half of a percentage point, but so did the bar. So last year we actually met it, and our percentage was lower. And this year our percentage went up, but because the bar went up by a full point, we didn't quite meet that one. But I think we're still doing really well in this. So it's just a little bit frustrating that we did improve, but because the bar went up, we didn't meet that one. And then the identification and services. This is one that we've been working on, and Mr. Broadwater alluded to it earlier, where we're talking about, and so did Ms. Washburn, where we are making sure that we are serving and getting credit, because we know that our teachers are providing that enrichment and that differentiation within the classroom. And if they're doing that, we might as well get the credit for it with the state. And so we're just making sure that all of our teachers have the required professional learning hours so that we can count all of our students as served. Just sort of as a reference, prior to this year, last year, our big push was at the high school for our AP English and math teachers, because prior to last year, we didn't have any students at the high school level or second grade being served. And so whenever you don't serve those students, which you're not required to, you're required to identify, you're not required to serve, but obviously we want to provide as much as we can for our students. We had to send out no service letters to parents just to notify them that their student wasn't being served for their gifted identification. Last year, we really focused in on AP English and math at the high school, and we were able to capture about 52% of our gifted students at the high school that we were able to consider served. And so that's sort of what's captured in last year's report. This year, so in a year from now, when we're looking at this, it should improve even more, because now we're serving 100% of our second grade students, because all of those teachers are getting that professional development, and all of our English and math teachers at the high school are getting it. And so every student across the district, with the exception of students that are not sitting in a Loveland classroom like CCP or the Oaks, which is 21 students at the high school this year, are being served. So out of 1,100 students roughly in the district who are identified as gifted, 21 will not be served. And that's just because it's out of our control, because those students are sitting in CCP or Oaks classes. So that should be an even more significant improvement for next year. But really what the identification and services is looking at is, are we serving, what percentage of our students are we serving that we're identifying? And then it also goes even deeper to look at subgroups like economically disadvantaged and minority students. And they want to see a correlation between those subgroups as the whole population as it relates to gifted. So if we have 10% of our student population is economically disadvantaged, they want us to be close to 10% of our gifted population is also economically disadvantaged. And so it's looking at the discrepancies there. I can say of all the students that are identified, 100% are being served, but we're a little bit low on the identification side of things. So that's why the percentage, we have gone up since last year. We were around like 47% last year, and well, 2 years ago. And then last year we're at 52.9. And then next year, I think we'll go up even higher. So we're improving. It's just, small baby steps, a little bit at a time.
With the high school, so the CCP students, like that counts against this calculation, or?
It doesn't necessarily count against us. It's just that in order for a student to be considered served, the instructor has to have a certain number of hours in targeted gifted professional development. And it's a lot. It's 15 hours a year for 4 years. So you have to get 60 hours over 4 years, and then 3 hours every year after that. So with these professors at the college level, I mean, we don't really have any say in what their professional development looks like, or, are able to really count those students. So
There's some irony. in not
unfortunately,
counting
I know.
college classes as
I know.
Yeah.
And then the next one is the gifted progress. We did meet that, so we got 5 out of 5 there. So we are continuing to grow our gifted students at least a year or more. So that basically is a very broad overview of gap closing, but we take our earn points, divide by possible, and we are at 68.2%, which gave us those 5 stars.
Can you just go back, and I'll always pick the thing that we did worst on to beat you up the most on. The math section where we were 1 out of 9.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. And math is hard. And I've actually met with several of our math teachers last year, and just pulling up some of that value added data and really starting to dig in. And even to follow up on that, Brian, Mr. Lee, and I are going to EVOS University in a couple of weeks in North Carolina to do 3.5 days of value added training and really digging into the platform. And it's really based around not just analyzing the data, but then what do you do with that? How do you come back? How do you work with teachers on that? Because the platform is very involved, and it's overwhelming and kind of intimidating. And so I don't think that teachers, even administrators, really get into it too deep, because it is so involved. And so I think whenever we go, we're going to be able to bring back a lot, and then really start to meet with individual teachers and departments as a whole, because I think if they had a better understanding of it, I think we could make some more progress there.
Do you think there's any, I was curious and I asked Mr. Broadwater about this. If it's based on end of course exams and we're not, like if a student is ahead, so if in, let's say in their freshman year, the end of course exam would be for geometry, but they've already took geometry and they're not taking it, does that hurt us? No? Okay.
No, but it's
Okay.
only what they take.
Okay.
I think it plays into what Dr. Goldie talked about with math interventions, how we
yeah.
had done reading interventions. The difficult part about math, something I know a little bit about as a math teacher, but the difficult part is you don't do interventions just to do interventions. What interventions are you doing? Reading, it's a little bit, I think it's a little bit easier to determine your reading level, but when it comes to math interventions, what grade level are we talking about and what type of interventions are we talking about? So I'll be interested to see what you learn.
Me too. And then the last one is graduation rate. So we're looking at two different cohorts of students, the 4-year graduation rate and then catching back up with them after 5 years. So you're really looking at two different cohorts here. And it's very similar with the weighted. The 4-year graduation rate is weighted at 60%. The 5 years weighted at 40%. And you just do the math and add it up and we're at 98.84. We need a 96.5 to get 5 stars. Last year we're at 98.3. So we improved there a little bit too. So overall, lots of small improvements, but it's hard to improve when you're already that high. And so I think any incremental improvement is great and we're celebrating. Are there any other questions?
I don't have a question as much as a statement, and you went through all the slides, but I was just looking back, which number was 17. 1 out of 18 districts in the state to score 5 stars in every category, one of only 2 in Hamilton County. You guys are doing a great job. Thanks.
Our teachers are awesome. Fantastic.
I'll echo one thing, which is our kids are awesome. I mean, just the way they present themselves, number one, but how they perform, and it's a direct reflection of our staff and how hard they work. But I was talking to Dave Spencer, our high school principal, and I don't think I've told our board this, but as we're looking at the start time at the high school, you know, you're looking at tardies and the excused absence, and the absence is what rang the bell. And I asked Dave to kind of put together some data in terms of what are we looking at for students, and the number of students that have no tardies, no behavioral issues, or any truancy so far this year, 94% of our kids fit into that category. So 6% of our kiddos are the ones that we really need to look at and see how can we provide interventions or help. But I think it's important to realize that we do have a lot of things going well, and we want to make sure we continue to add the supports to the students that need it. So just something that popped into my head when we were talking about that.
I think it's interesting for people in the community too, as we look ahead next year and the career and technical readiness measures. Today, I happened to be in downtown Loveland and there was a student who's interning at Bike Trail Books. And I think just the number of businesses that you go into locally that have a high school student participating in one of those internships, it's fun to see our kids out in the community, both from a service perspective and from a work perspective, which goes to the CAT feedback too.
Right. And I would say, I know Brian Lee went to, what was the meeting last week that you went to? Yeah, and then Brian made the comment that obviously we want to continue to move forward in that, but if you were to look at what our other districts are, we're probably ahead of the game a little bit, and that's why we've got the position there to make sure we're continuing to do it. So, but I think it plays right into, again, what Dr. Goldie talked about also.
Great. Anything else, Mr. Broadwater?
That is it. Thank you.
Any further questions for Mr. Broadwater? Thanks again to, what's that?
So that was a lot of information.
That's right.
Good stuff.
Thanks to Mr. Broadwater, thanks to Dr. Puerta, and just a reminder, we'll have those, as they said, the individual building reports coming up in upcoming meetings. We are changing that to have one building per meeting, so we have a little more time, and so our minds don't get numb by too many statistics. And I think that'll help us to really focus in on each one of our buildings and the great things that are happening. All right. Moving on in our agenda, the first reading of board policies. We have 3 policies that we have a first reading of tonight. Artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and graduation requirements. Those were in board docs. I believe do these all come straight from OSBA or?
Yes, so there are 2 new policies that are recommended in the release from OSBA, and then there's one update. If I could go back to sorry, taking a look at this. Jumped ahead. Yes, looking at EDEC and EHC, which are artificial intelligence and cybersecurity, those are the new policies. They're really just putting guardrails around artificial intelligence and the use. Dr. Puerta and Mr. Samuels are going to be working with an AI cohort. So we expect that they're going to develop a regulation, which if you think about the policy, it's like a 10,000-foot view. The regulation is going to be how we put that policy in place and the actual practice. So that'll be good information to bring back from the AI cohort as they develop that. And that'll be something that typically with regulations, we don't have to have the board approve those, but we have typically brought them to you so you can have eyes on how we're essentially acting out the policies. So we would bring those back.
The AI cohort consists of staff members, correct?
Yes, it's staff members, and also it's being led by Forward Edge, which is one of the vendors that we work with. It's a group of people that have the passion for that specific, utilizing artificial intelligence. Cybersecurity, obviously, you've heard some districts that have had issues with cybersecurity. So again, putting some guardrails around what we do as a district to protect, ourselves from those kind of cyber attacks. And then when we look at the graduation requirements, this is probably the simplest one, is adding in the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce from ODE and striking out some language that just said State Board of Education that no longer has the purview over this. So again, these are first reads, so they are in board docs in the administrative section for the board to review. Happy to answer any questions you might have. Could also say that it did go through the policy committee with Dr. Swetchenow a couple weeks ago.
Fine tooth comb in the policy committee meeting.
Any comments from the policy committee on that?
And not really. I mean, it's worth reading, and especially in the AI, I'm very happy that we've been forward thinking enough to bring a cohort together to figure out how we're going to do this, because it's coming whether you like it or not. And if you don't engage students and teach them, A, how to use the material, they'll fall behind, and B, how to use it properly, they'll get into trouble later. Much less school, but the work and life as well. So I think that having it modeled correctly and used early is a good thing and not a bad thing. So just read it. It's very generic. Like you said, it's a 10,000-foot view. It'll be interesting to see how quickly that changes over time.
We've got our AI cohort tomorrow. We have about 25 staff members from every different level, and it's interesting to see every level's got different thoughts about it, correct? And so how you come about something for the district, it's been really good. It's been good conversation. So.
Just as an aside, and maybe as an exercise going forwards, one of the readings I was doing about it was using AI in history class to have a student debate with a historical figure done by the AI. So how would you debate Abraham Lincoln about slavery? And then, so you would use AI to come up with those points, and then you'd have to figure out how would you counter those points.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, you get the range. There are kids that obviously could abuse it and having to write papers, and that's what everyone hears about. But talk to my son in graduate school and using it as a tool to begin research for papers and to begin to build that bibliography, and found it really helpful to identify sources.
Right. I may or may not use it when I'm preparing some things to say.
Just the poems.
Just right.
All right, well, again, this is the first reading of these, no action required tonight. But if you have additional questions, comments before our next meeting where we will be looking to approve these, please feel free to reach out to administrators or to me, and happy to make sure we get those addressed for our next meeting or to our doctor policy. All right, then board resolutions. We have a policy to approve under board resolutions, the DAB cash balance policy. Further
Yes.
comments about that?
Yes, so again, this cash balance policy was a recommendation of OSBA. I served on a committee for my professional organization, OASBO, a few years ago, and we developed 5 different cash balance policies that were based on what districts utilized across the state. And so I chose the one that I felt was best aligned to what we were doing here in Loveland, and brought that through the board, the last board work session. And really, this is just a policy that creates a no surprises approach where if there are 90 days or less cash at any point during the 5-year forecast, it says that I must come to the board with a plan, or at least letting you know that that's the process or where we are, and then what we would do going forward to shore up more revenue. So it also has 150 days on the top end too. So if our cash balance was rising, it says that Mr. Broadwater and I would come to you and basically come up with a plan on how we can better bolster the strategic vision. And so I like having both sides. And again,
We
this is
long
the
for those days, Mr. Espy. Yes.
Yes, I hope that happens. So, yeah, again, this is the second read, so this would be for board vote.
The policy is really related to forecasting, right? It's looking forward. So it's not a reactionary policy that when we get to 90 days of funds that now we need to do something. This is looking, a forward-looking policy.
It's forward thinking, and I think the most important piece of this is policy is meant to exist over time. And so we have a set group of people here that, here in the room right now, a certain, elected Board of Education and a superintendent as well as a treasurer. This policy being in place will affect the district over, unless it were to be changed over time. I think that that's really what the crux of this is. And it's really important that this be monitored and this be shared with the board so you can make the best decision that you can.
I really appreciate it as a policy. I think it's very wise. Another organization I was a part of, there wasn't a finance committee meeting that went by without one of the members saying, cash is king. And we know that, the importance of having the cash on hand to any organization, and making sure you're planning for that ahead of time is very prudent. And I think this is a wise measure. Any other comments, concerns, policy as presented? We have a motion to approve the cash balance policy as presented.
So moved.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Dr. Swetchinow?
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn?
Yes.
Reverend Eilert?
Yes.
Mrs. Mangan?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, policy is approved. We move on to 4.2, the waiving of the first reading of policies and regulations related to our organizational chart, CCA and DLCR for reimbursements. We have a motion to waive the first reading of these policies.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Washburn?
Yes.
Reverend Eilert?
Yes.
Mrs. Mangan?
Yes.
Dr. Swetchinow?
Yes.
Thank you. So then we now move to the consideration of those policies, the CCA organizational chart and DLCR reimbursements. Mr. Espy?
Yeah, so the organization chart came with a change that was made when Mr. Bryant came on as our Director of Business Operations. And it just kind of reorganized a few things. This is important because we have to submit this to our grant writer to help in that process. It's important. They collect a lot of information. So when I went through there, I noticed that this needed to be updated. So we would just like to ask that you obviously waive this so we can get this in place quickly. And then the DLCR, again, as I said before, regulations typically don't come to the board, but we would like to get this in place quickly just because it shores up some of the processes we've been working through with staff reimbursements if they go to a professional development. And it would be nice to have in place before this next month where we have a lot of staff travel.
Any significant changes on the reimbursements to highlight?
Really what it does is it standardizes reimbursements to the GSA rate, which is a government rate. So we plug in, where a staff member is going, and we get rates on how much breakfast, lunch, and dinner costs. We also, as part of this, we will take the itinerary of wherever that staff member is going. And if they are provided lunch, we would not essentially reimburse them for lunch because it's part of the event that they're going to already. So it cleans up a lot of processes where we would have district credit cards checked out. Now it's just a reimbursement to that staff member.
Any other questions, comments on the policies as presented? All right, we have a motion to adopt the following policies, regulations for CCA and DLC.
A second.
All right, roll call, please.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes.
Mrs. Mangan, Dr. Swetchenow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes.
You. All right, then moving on to item 4.4, continuity of learning plan for 24-25. Treasurer and superintendent recommend that the board adopt the following plan. Again, that's in board docs.
Okay, I don't know if I just missed it. Did we do both 4.2 and 4.3? We waived it and we accepted it?
Yes.
Okay.
So happy to talk about the continuity of learning plan. This was something that initially came about due to the COVID pandemic. We're essentially looking over how we're going to do overview, how we're going to take attendance, how we're going to deliver instruction, community, and technology. And now this next step is also partnering with the teachers union within the district. And so what this is essentially establishing this. This is something that Ohio Department of Education and Workforce requires to be done every year. So you'll be seeing this every year. It's really procedural. We don't intend to use this a ton, I would say, but it's just a plan to have in place should we have to go to a remote learning or remote instruction process.
All right, any questions about the continuity of learning plan? Right, do we have a motion to approve the plan as presented?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Mangan,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert.
Yes. We've got 4.5, the approval of the memorandum of understanding with OPSI. One of you is going to be addressing it.
I think I'm going to be.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, everybody. The agreement here that we have with OPSI, there are a couple of different items that are in here. So we, of course, we know that we had a transition with our Director of Business Operations. Rich has done a really nice job. Mike has kind of like tasked Rich with a number of things that have to do with the exterior of our buildings. And making sure that we are taking care of what we have. And some people might not know, when you work with an association, contracting out work is something that cannot be done without working with your association with it. So there are a couple of things here, and of course, this is in board docs, board members for you to see. But every year there is kind of a monumental task about placing mulch on our playgrounds, and that goes from LECC, PS, ES, and IS. And that's quite the undertaking. So we worked with them to be able to, if we need to be able to kind of contract out that work. That's mainly happens at a one time a year over the summer, preparing for the next school year. You can also see in here, we switched vendors with some of our supplies. We're working with Centos now, which is great. One of the things that our contract with Centos does is that there is a person that's basically that part of their role for Centos is to be working with our head and lead custodians with all of their items that they have to be putting in for, keeping track of all of our supplies for them to do all the ordering. That was a task that was completely done by our head and lead custodians before. Now they're having some assistance with it and they're working with them. So we wanted to make sure to document that here in the MOU. And then you will also see that a little bit further down in the MOU is that we're talking about an additional maintenance position. If for those of you who are not aware, of course, we have multiple places where our maintenance folks are always working. We have multiple campuses. On the Claremont County side, of course, we have LECC. And then down in Loveland, of course, we have the ES and PS campus, the campus that we are here now, and then, of course, the high school campus. So when it comes to all of our maintenance, grass cutting, fixing of things, doors that aren't working, badge readers, striping, parking lots, all of the maintenance work that happens, we are really low on our manpower with that. And something that we've been talking about with working with our PI budget, and kudos to Mr. Espy, Mr. Broadwater, and Mr. Bryant for us to be able to add an additional maintenance position, but none of that is going to be touching the general fund, but being able to pay for that position through our permanent improvement fund. So that's another piece that's in here. All of this doesn't happen with a good relationship with our association. So we've been working with them. We are very happy and proud that they took this to their organization. And of course, it's been supported. So now I'm bringing it to the board for your consideration.
Questions for Mr. Collier?
Garth, I just had a question on number 3, which was the baseball and softball fields. Was there a reason that that was carved out rather than the soccer fields or the rest of the grass or anything else?
Yeah. So in the springtime is when the grass cutting is kind of like at its highest point. And with only 2 different people that are doing grass cutting, depending upon the weather, and we're trying to get games in with baseball and softball schedules are really hard because you have lots of games. And then if you have a rain delay, then you're backing up things. And getting to the baseball and softball fields, along with all of our other grass cutting that's everywhere. When we're having a competition, having those sports games, we would rather maybe not cut this front grass and make sure that for the competition piece for our kids and for other, around the community, for those teams to be coming, making sure that that could be a priority. Sometimes, depending upon the weather, it's hard to get to that. So this leaves us the ability to be able to have some grass cutting, especially in those areas. If we need to contract some of that out, our OPSI group is willing for us to be able to do that. It's kind of like a safety net for us to make sure that in that really high volume season, we can make sure that we have things prepped and ready to go. A good question. For those people who may not know, like our high school soccer team and our football team, they play on our turf. So there isn't any grass cutting that happens there. Both our baseball field and our softball field, those fields are all grass. So of course, those need ongoing maintenance, where a turf field wouldn't need that.
Make a comment. Getting to meet with our administrators regularly. This discussion's been going on since the summertime. And I think that group does a wonderful job of really looking at what are the needs, wherever they best address, how do we best use our resources. And then going to OPSI with a well-defined plan really makes a difference that brings this here. So it looks silly to be talking about mulch maybe at a, but it's a really important thing in thinking about how do we best utilize our personnel and how do we best utilize our resources. So thank you for being very thoughtful in the work that all of you do together to make sure that using those resources.
Yeah, I think the thing that's, you know, we talk about it a bunch and we talk about reallocation of staff and we're looking at the bottom line, making sure that we are being fiscally responsible, but also responding to the needs of the district. The thing about this that I'm most excited about, other than, of course, working alongside the OPSI group and being able to move in a positive direction with that group, is that it not touching the general fund and this coming out of the PI is a really big thing for us. So us really kind of taking a look at, and I know the finance committee's been looking at this, but really taking a look at our PI budget and making sure that we are using that that money to the best of our ability and being able to utilize it in this instance with it not touching the general fund is really big for us. So I'm glad that we can make it happen. I'm glad that it's not, you know, touching the general fund, and that all goes to you know, us, you know, making sure that looking at our budgets to make sure we can fit it in with all of the needs that we have.
Just to jump in and say thank you to the OPSI Association for working with us. Those are difficult conversations, but we landed in a great place. And at convocation, we talked about customer service and making sure we take care of the staff in the classroom and elsewhere so they can do what they do for kids. And yeah, I've told Mr. Bryant, with the new maintenance and the reorganization, when there's work orders, I would like to see them completed and make sure that we're taking care of the staff as much as possible. And if it's not possible, at least communicating why or why not. And so it goes right along with what we talked about, just making sure we're providing good customer service for all our staff and kids as well.
Yeah, and the addition of a maintenance position is not a knock on our current maintenance folks that we have and not a knock on our custodial staff that we have that are working every day. It really just comes down to the amount of work that can get done in a given time, making sure that we're responding to the needs. We feel like this is the right move. It doesn't have anything to do with that. We don't feel like that they're working hard. It's really just a matter of there's too many things to get done in a certain amount of time. And we wanted to make sure to prioritize it and take care of with what we have.
Garth, I don't know if you mentioned how many maintenance staff we actually have, but for the campuses that we have,
We just have 3, so this would add a 4th maintenance person. And one of our maintenance guys, for the most part, really works a whole bunch with just working on electric. So that leaves our other 2 maintenance guys to do all of our grass cutting, all of our work orders that have anything that is, you know, not a standard inside the school kind of a fix. We're just super thin in that area, and we're hoping to be able to use that group in a better way and to knock out work orders so that our staff and students and everyone sees that when there is something that's broken or something that needs to be fixed, we're going to be able to get to it in a quicker amount of time. And we feel like Rich has come up with a really nice plan for that.
Well, and I would add, we talked about this a little bit in finance and just how can we afford this? But one of the things that is a big driver is the ability of the teachers to teach and not worry about the ceiling tile falling down or something dripping out of a vent. Do we have the ability to look at what our closure rate for tickets has been in the time of closure and what that will be going forwards?
Yeah, that's something, it's a good question, Dr. Schwetzer. Now, that's something I've been looking into. So I now have access to all of our work orders and our work requests and that flow of when it gets put in, who it gets assigned to, and how long it takes for those to be closed. And that's what kind of prompted this, is that when we were trying to get ready for the school year and we were looking at work requests that were out there, we were looking at mulch needing to be provided on our playgrounds. There were some things that we were like, man, we really have got to take a look at this. And we had some work requests that were put in before the school year ended, and those things still hadn't been able to be addressed before the school year started over the summer. And that's a whole summertime's worth of work of folks working, trying to get things done. And so we know now, right now, kind of like what our rate is. And of course, we're looking to improve it. And we're also looking at being able to kind of isolate things to certain buildings and trying to see, are there certain buildings that that we're able to get things done in a quicker fashion. And really a lot of this is that there is just a whole brand new look of what Mike has kind of tasked Mr. Bryant to do. So we've kind of like folded back. I think we've done a really nice job on the inside of our buildings. Mr. Ames worked tirelessly for years and years, making sure to keep our buildings the way that they are, the way they are today. But there's always a give and take with that. If you're doing lots of work and keeping things up on the inside, there's always things on the outside that might not be as appealing. Examples might be, dead trees that are on our properties, trees that were just blown over from a storm. There are lots and lots of things that the common person might not know that need to be taken care of, and that our maintenance folks are stretched very thin. And, Rich has done a good job of trying to prioritize things, taking a look at what is the most important need and start to have a plan of attack to get these done, instead of just well, let's just try to get through it as best we can. And he's done a nice job, and I'm excited for our maintenance group to have a new person and to see what we can do with our new plan.
In terms of tracking it, we also know that the work orders might actually go up for a while because for right now, people know there's a backlog. They're not even necessarily submitting some things. So once they see things beginning to work, we see some more work orders.
Yeah.
coming.
We don't want to plant that seed, but yeah, we might. Now, I liken it to Adam Samuels does a really nice job with technology and the tickets that we get and tickets closed, and that directly affects the classroom as well. But you can always improve, and Rich has done a great job. But I will echo what Garth said as well. Our maintenance guys work very, very hard. This is not indicative of that. It's basically there's just too much work for 3 people.
Yeah, and there are a lot of school districts that handle things in different ways. Some places outsource all of their grass cutting, and the amount of acres that and time that it takes to cut all of our grass and to weed eat all of our areas in the spring and in the fall. 2 of our 3 maintenance guys, it's pretty much an all day, every day thing just to get grass cut. And then that's when there gets to be a backlog of all of these work requests. We're just trying to have a more strategic plan, and I'm hoping that people will notice all the efforts. And I think they're going to. And I think that, as we said, that our maintenance staff are going to be glad to be able to, share the wealth a little bit, because when you work hard every day, all day, and then people are still saying, well, that doesn't look as good, or how come you didn't get to this? And you've kind of been busting your hump all day, and you can feel like you're never catching up. That's a bad cycle to be in. And I think that when this plan gets executed and we have an additional maintenance person, I think that they're going to feel much better about their work.
All right. We have a motion then to approve the resolution, to approve the memorandum of understanding with OPSI Local 363.
So moved. Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Mangan,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchnow.
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to your report then.
Yes.
Collier. We have the items from the Assistant Superintendent from Human Resources that are in board docs, and so bring those up now. And what comments do you have on those items before?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to make sure to highlight a couple of areas for the board, and to be honest, for the community at large. Are in section A at the top here. A1 at a previous meeting, we had talked about when Ann Howard's retirement was on the board agenda. We had talked about making sure to give her some kudos for all the hard work that she has done. This is just simply changing the date from a January 1st date. She has now moved it up, and at the end of October is when she's going to be finished. And she is going to be really, really missed at LPS. And then moving on down, you will see at the very end at number 9, that same kind of thing with one of our secretaries here. Mrs. Buck Kennedy put in for her retirement. there were some things that she was trying to sort out with her retirement. She ended up needing to work a little while longer, so we adjusted that date for her. She was back, she never really ended up retiring. She was continuing to work for us. And now she has those things sorted out. She's been with us for a number of years, so a huge thanks to her for all of her service. And then we have a teacher, the first one of the year that I believe that is put in for retirement at the end of this school year, and that is Karen Clary. And she is a language arts teacher at the middle school, and she'll be finishing up her 34th year here at Loveland City Schools. So it's an understatement to say that we appreciate her service for something that she's been doing for 34 years here. So just wanted to make sure to point those out to the group.
Right. Do we have a motion then to approve the resolutions of Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, including resignations and employment of certified classified homebound substitute and supplemental positions for the 24-25 school year?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Dr. Swetchenow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes.
Mrs. Mangan.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Collier. All right, Mr. Espy, back to treasurer report.
Thank you, President Eilert, members of the board. Happy to look through a report that I've prepared for you this evening. I will first start with, September monthly analysis. As we look through, hold on, I'm fighting with this a little bit right now. Yeah, I got my cookie. Yeah. You were zigging and I was zagging, so. All right. So September monthly analysis, looking at 25% through the fiscal year or 3 months. Our expenditures and revenues are currently showing a positive impact on our cash balance of 1.3% of our forecasted expenditures. When we look at the expenditures, specifically a 0.2 variance on the forecasted expenditures, primarily in the salary and benefits, as well as our purchase services continuing to be below the forecast. I should also point out there'll be a new forecast that I bring for your approval next month. So these will, start to adjust and be much more closer than 1.3%, although that's still fairly close. When we look at revenue specifically, 1.1% variance to forecasted revenues, and that's due to interest and sinking fund revenue. When I initially did this forecast, I had forecasted that the interest was going to drop a little bit more substantially than it has. I'm actually going to get into a little bit of the interest income and the strategy that we've been utilizing. But when we look at interest income specifically, $49,731.54 month to date for a fiscal year to date of $219,375.37. When we look at September investment analysis, the thing that I really want to point out is over to the right. You'll notice that Star Ohio interest dropped from 5.56% this time last year, or at the end of September last year, to 5.08%. Today, it's at 4.86%. And so the good news is that we kind of knew that was happening. And so you'll notice that a lot more has been invested into commercial paper. We also typically we leave a good reserve in Star. We pulled a lot out of Star and left about 2 months of operating just to give ourselves a cushion for liquidity, but also then move that into commercial paper. We were able to actually lock that in at slightly higher than 5%. So we're good for the next 3 to 4 months in terms of locking that in and continuing to get interest rates in the 5% area, while we expect the interest rates to continue to fall into the 4s. So that's really the overarching idea of what we've been doing. I work closely with Red Tree and our specific investment advisor, and we talk, multiple times a week on just strategy, talking about cash flow. And it's a rarity how we're doing things when we look at other districts because we're looking at moving monies more often, which puts a little bit more stress on my office. But what it does is allow us to achieve a higher interest rate than if we weren't doing that. I also wanted to brief the board on a health benefits deep dive that we did here within the district. We partnered with Hub, which is formerly known as Haran, who are benefit specialists, and they were able to take our data from our health consortium, which is Greater Cincinnati Insurance Consortium. We also call them GCIC. So when you hear us using that terminology, you'll know what that means. And we did a deep dive of really what we wanted to do is learn if GCIC was our best option for a consortium, because there are options. We also wanted to look at the cost versus the richness of the plan. Richness of the plan, you'll also hear it called actuarial value. So really those are kind of synonymous. And then we also just wanted to look at how LCS employees are consuming healthcare. And Hub did a great job of pulling together data for us. And we were able to get briefed late summer, Mr. Broadwater and I, and then we were able to meet with both the OPSI union and LEA to kind of go over those findings. And we wanted to do that before we brought it here for the board to see, just to make sure that they were aware of the findings as well. What we learned is that our insurance premiums are nearly 20% less than like districts. And you'll see in the orange section in the middle, the 2023 CERB benchmark. CERB stands for State Employee Relations Board. And so CERB collects all of this information from districts, and then they look at districts that are similar to us, and they perform, kind of some analysis to find that similar to what we do when we're looking at expenditures per pupil. And it's just pretty remarkable to see numbers like that, because really what that means is that the district is saving money. And when the district is saving money, we're also passing that savings on to our employees as well. I would say that this was a pleasant surprise. I think Mr. Broadwater would probably echo that, but just seeing that where we are is wonderful. So my next question is, okay, if we're sitting at 20% lower, what's the richness or the actuarial value look like? And what we're able to see is we're within 2% of the CERB PPO benchmark. So a really, really good plan for a low cost. So just really good stuff that we saw. We're also going to be engaging with Hub going forward to set up insurance committee meetings that are going to happen quarterly. We would like to have an OPSI member on that, an LEA member, an administrative member, and also exempt employees. And so really what will happen with that is we'll have a third party that's coming in and sharing information with us. And that typically has worked really, really well in other districts that I've worked in. Also, something that we're looking at is the number of eligible employees that we have that could go on Medicare. And so we're going to be utilizing Hub to educate our employees and make sure that they understand when they're eligible, and also just looking and weighing, because there's a lot to weigh if you're considering going on Medicare, whether it's right for you. So really it's a service that I think is going to be very helpful to the entire district and kind of meet the needs that maybe haven't been met thus far in that area for everyone to be able to benefit from. I also wanted to take a moment to talk about some CAT meeting #2 highlights. So when we look at our expenditures, we're at 83% personnel costs, and we could even argue that a portion of that purchase service is also personnel costs, but and that's really because we do contracting for some services that we have, vendors provide to our students and to our staff. But when we look at, our true personnel costs of individuals that we're paying, we're at 83%. So by far the lion's share of what we're spending in expenses are on people. It's because we're a people business. We employ people to keep this entire school community functioning and educate our students. And so when we look at that, it's important for us to do a deep dive on what those expenses look like in terms of how we're doing when we benchmark with others. So I'm going to share some information. The first one is overall expenditures. So 62% of Ohio school districts spend more than we do. Now we're going to get into some very specific staff data. 97% of Ohio schools have more teachers per student than we do. And 96% of Ohio schools have more admin per student than we do. So when we're looking at our 83% lion's share of expenditures, we're in the, 90, bottom 3 and bottom 4% in teachers and in admin. Additionally, when we look at our staffing levels over time, and I apologize, I know this is small, but I will be providing this on board docs so you can go and find this. The orange line is showing our enrollment over the last 10 years. The blue is showing our difference in FTE or full-time equivalent. So what we can say is that over the last 10 years, specifically with our teaching staff, as enrollment has dropped, we have reacted to that, and it's actually at a higher rate. We've reacted at a higher rate because our staffing has dropped at 12%, whereas our enrollment has dropped at 11.52%. I also want to address the fact that enrollment is dropping. It's dropping, but it's dropping within the average that we're seeing at the state, which is around 3% per year. So it's actually dropping less than that, but I think that's a pretty interesting stat when we look at our overall staffing levels and how we're reacting to that enrollment. Something else to look at is when we look at our other 18 5-stars in every category district. So again, there are more districts that have 5-star rating, but we're looking at just those 18 that have 5 stars in every category. We have the most students per teacher, which we can see over on the right side with the arrow, a little bit over 20 students per teacher. So have the most students being served by a teacher in that group. When you look over to the left, the per pupil spending, we're second to last in per pupil spending in that group of 18. So you're talking about the top 3% of the state, and you see that we're in the second to last in per pupil expenditures and have the most students being served by each teacher. It's a remarkable stat. And again, I think it's something that to give kudos to our staff for what they're able to do with our students every day. Got a new chart. So I was messing around with some data at the end of last week, and I found this stat, which just seemed remarkable to me. This is operation cost per square foot. And I used the group of 18 5 stars in every category districts. We're second to last in those operations. It's the same district that was below us and in per pupil expenditures is below us in those operations costs. But every year we actually have to report our square footage to the state. And then we also report through a data collection of financial information, all the functions, which is the second grouping of numbers in the budget code. And that's how they can tell that what our operations are by each of their square footage. So again, I don't know. I spend my time worrying about us a lot, but it definitely seemed a little weird. But nonetheless, you could see that the other 16 are in that kind of bunched up in that section. So we're, I believe, below $6 per square foot in operations cost, and then other districts are up in the tens. So just another data point that I thought I'd share. That wasn't necessarily shared with the CAT because that was something that that I've dug into last week, but something I wanted to share tonight.
So did you call Marion City Schools yet?
I haven't. I have some questions though.
They are an extremely small district, I will tell you that.
They are,
Up in
but
West Ohio.
I want to see how they're doing some reporting. So,
Well, the other one, I'd like to see their report too. The one looks like a roller coaster.
yeah, that's either the top one is either Steubenville or Oakwood. So, it's I can dig into that a little bit more, but again, been worried about us a lot. So finally, I wanted to go over ongoing projects. We, at the last regular meeting, you approved a total pay contract. So we're working on that. Again, that's gonna roll out and allow us to get more rebates on essentially we're gonna be able to get paid to pay our bills, which is pretty awesome. I like to look at that for my home bills, but, and then also we're rolling out electronic timesheets. So I told you that the drivers was gonna take a while. That's actually starting here soon. So we've started those conversations and tried to plan that out. So that'll be sooner than later. We're also doing a payroll account audit. So I'm going through every single person that is paid in the district and making sure that that the account that they're being paid out of in terms of the budget account code is what we agree on, and that we agree that it's in the right spot. So we're going to be doing that with the Assistant Treasurer Rachel, as well as the payroll team. We've also created a payroll change form. This is going to be an SCView, which is our workflow software. What happens here is it's to improve communication. So when we have a change of a staff member, that essentially in Mr. Collier's office, there'll be a kickoff of, hey, this staff member is going from this building to this building, and it will come to our payroll team. The payroll team can then either make a change right then, or if it's April and you know this is going to be happening in the next school year, it goes into a holding zone. Once we're ready to make those changes, we make those changes, and then it archives that document. So we always know where that person came from. So that's all electronic, and just a great way, I think, for us to continue to develop our communication between offices. Also working on grant writing. I have like 4 to 5 grants that we're working on right now. And we're also going to start working in tandem with the foundation to make sure that if a grant doesn't seem right for maybe the school district to apply for, we can pass that on to the foundation to make sure that they can kind of go after it. And then finally, we have our financial and our gap audit. It's underway. Our gap audit is probably 99% done. There are a few reports that I'm working with our financial support team with SWOCA to help us work on, and then the financial audit is wrapping up here soon as well. So it was a longer report than normal. I apologize, but I felt like there was a lot of information to be shared. So any questions?
Questions? All right. We have a motion to accept the financial reports for September 2024.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes.
Mrs. Mangan,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenow.
Yes.
Thank you for the report. We'll make sure to make a note to have the additional chairs necessary for your riveting analysis of next month. So.
Yeah, I was hoping for standing room only, but it was getting late, so I totally understand people not wanting to be here. But I'm sure that the YouTube spike, the viewers at home, I'm sure have spiked up.
I did ask Mr. Samuels. He said no. No, geez.
See, we didn't need that. We didn't need that.
I do want to take a second and just compliment John he did a great job at the CAT second meeting, just a great job of informing everybody, and also bringing in Hub. Like John had said, we were pleasantly surprised. So I appreciate him bringing in Hub to take a look at it. We know we've got a good product, so that's a good thing. So thanks to John.
Excellent. All right, 6.2, donation to report.
Yes, again, Kevin and Cecilia Watts are donating $300. This brings, I think, their total up to $7,200. So very remarkable. Yes, very grateful.
Excellent. Do we have a motion to accept the donation?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Good, and roll call, please.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes.
Mrs. Mangan,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenow.
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes.
Excellent. Again, for their support. Contracts, 6.3. We have recommended contracts that are presented here, state pricing. Comments about that?
Yeah, it's for our Canon copiers, so this just allows us to achieve state pricing. So whenever we enter into a state pricing agreement, we have to have the board approve it. We're really only approving the addendum because the contract has been approved before. recognizing that you might not have been the board that approved that, I put that contract in there so you could see all 91 pages of it, if you're interested. But our legal counsel has reviewed it again, and it's in good shape. So if
Dr.
you
Wallace,
approve,
did
we
you
can get
study
some
all of that?
copiers.
I had a question about page 46.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you for giving us all of that information. That can be helpful. Any other questions, for Mr. Espy, about that contract in the addendum? We have a motion to approve the contract addendum as presented.
So moved.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Mangan,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert.
Yes. You. 6.4, payment in lieu of transportation for students.
We received one additional student, so that's why we're bringing it to you this evening.
Any questions about that? A motion to approve this additional student as presented.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Mangan,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert.
Yes. Any further work done on we talked about trying to put some timeframes on that piece, correct, in the future?
Yeah, we're still working on that. It's going to be something that's probably what I would call a January or February project. There are a lot of items that are coming up that we're working through, and the forecast has been probably my major focus. I work on it daily, honestly, but after this CAT meeting, the forecast is going to be the major thing.
Great. I believe that concludes our business for tonight. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned at 7:54 PM.